Welcome to this Asia Global podcast, brought to you by the Asia Global Institute at the University of Hong Kong. I'm your host, Alejandro Reyes, the Institute's Director of Knowledge Dissemination. In our programs here in Hong Kong and online, and in the content that we produce, we focus on presenting Asian perspectives on global issues. This podcast is part of our Meet the Authors series, where we have a conversation with contributors to Asia Global Online and other publications of the Institute. Joining me now from Srinagar in Jammu and Kashmir, India, is Dr. Amit Wanchoo, who was a 2018 Asia Global Fellow of the Institute. Amit is a medical doctor, entrepreneur, and social activist. He is founder chairman of the H.N. Wanchoo Trust, which operates an ambulance service in the Kashmir Valley. And he is also CEO of Space Communications in Srinagar. Amit, welcome.
Thank you so much. It's an honor to be part of this series, Reese.
Great. Yes, thank you. Now, this year we have published 3 articles by you. The first looked at what it's like to live in lockdown. You described how Kashmiris have endured multiple lockdowns over the past 30 years. Your second piece looked at how the COVID-19 pandemic has highlighted the immense gulf in healthcare systems between the richest and poorest countries, as well as the inequalities within nations, such as India. As the world fights this global health crisis, you wrote that there is an opportunity to redesign health policies with the same broad goals for everyone, but with a country or area-specific methodology of planning and execution. Now, in your third piece, which appeared in July, a few weeks after the deadly clash between Indian and Chinese troops on June 15 near the Galwan Valley, you argued that China is upsetting the balance of power in South Asia to further its own economic and political interests. You warned that there is a grave danger of further armed conflict and even a war. To preserve peace and prosperity, you called on India, China, and Pakistan to move from confrontation in the Himalayas to cooperation around the negotiating table. Well, Amit, you got your wish to some extent. How do you see the situation now? We've seen diplomatic and military talks, the foreign ministers of China and India in Moscow, the military discussing disengagement even just yesterday, which is September 21, on the Chinese side of the line of actual control. What are your thoughts about the situation today?
Thank you so much for organizing this. Before I come to that, I would like to say one thing, and that is that all this year of 2020, as we say in medical terms, that this 2020 is a vision when you can see clearly. So this all year has been of sea, the COVID sea, the China, the South China Sea, the conflict. So as I personally believe that as of now, things are moving, but we are heading for a bitter winter because that the places where both countries are right now having confrontations, weather-wise, there will be a massive challenge October onwards. And then we also have the elections coming in Gilgit-Baltistan, which as of now are scheduled for 28th of October, which I had written in my piece also because that's an important part of CPEC. And then you also have American elections coming, hopefully in 2021, Jan-Feb, whenever they happen. So till that time, these aggressive postures will be there, which I personally believe will be there. And of course, both the countries know very well that they cannot go for full-fledged war. The war can be in a limited form. It can be something which is a pressure tactic. It can be something which is going to be aggressive formats from both sides or provocations, which has been happening. And we are seeing that in the past. So if we go, because it's also important to know that where from it started, why in May? Because when we see many things that happened even last year, August, or the things that happened in Jammu and Kashmir. So you have to see that once the COVID crisis happened way back in Jan-Feb, when there was massive crisis in China, and even in the media, the people were saying that president is nowhere visible, and there were lots of pressures within China. And then also pressures started coming from outside China, from countries, from WHO related things, then US calling it as a Chinese virus and things like that. And it built up massively till April, May. So this conflict was also one of the things, I personally feel that when you want peace, you prepare for war. Prepare for war. You don't go for war, but you prepare for war. So when there was a pressure within, because within was very important challenge to the leadership, and nationalism in Asia, is always one of the best things if you have to divert attention from anything, because nationalism joins you right from top to bottom. And so in order to handle that pressure within, it was this escalation started, I think not in June there was a massive 20 soldiers died on this side, but it started in May. So if it started in May, the preparation would have started somewhere in April or end of March, because that the area is not that weather friendly. And also the outside pressure, what helped leadership in China was also that the Western countries were not able to handle COVID, and then they also started losing lives. That helped Chinese leadership, because till that Chinese people were thinking that our own leadership was not able to handle COVID crisis, and we saw such a massive problem, both in terms of losing lives as well as economy. But then when they saw the West is also not able to, in spite of having all the best things available, so that helped the leadership. And that's how they started this methodology, because on the other side, as I have written in my write-up also, CPEC is a very important thing for them. And when this thing happened way back in 2019, the Jammu and Kashmir Union Territory was formed, Ladakh Union Territory was formed. So there was a presumption that India and Pakistan may have a war, maybe in the Gilgit-Baltistan side. In order to, I think, prevent and safeguard CPEC, China took this step, because when you involve the...
And CPEC, just to explain to our listeners, I
so
think
it
that...
is, it is basically China-Pakistan Economic Corridor,
Yes.
Like a Belt and Road initiative that we know.
Yes.
China has gone all across in Asia and having partnership with different countries in different projects. So similarly, they have a project with Pakistan, and this goes all the way from Kashgar to Gwadar port, which is the part of the Balochistan province in Pakistan, and is an important port. So it goes through Gilgit-Baltistan, and for that it's very important to secure. And you must have seen that in recent times, even Pakistan has given very huge dam projects to China in that region as well, because we know that the population of India and China are going to be dependent on water resources a lot, and this region has a lot of water resources. So it's also a fight between the water resources, And I personally believe that for all the three countries, it's only sharing that can result in a long term. And they will have to sit across, maybe not today, maybe after some time, because we also have to see that maybe 2022, 2023, when President Xi is going to have the third term, which he is basically focusing on. And he had promised his own people that GDP will increase double in 2021 for all of them. But economies have not been fine because of COVID, and there are a lot of pressures on him as well. So maybe till that time, we will see all these confrontations. And after that, I personally believe that they all have to come on the table and sit. And Russia always will be a key player.
Interesting. Now, we also ran a piece by a Chinese academic who made the argument that a repeat of this kind of border clash that occurred in June is inevitable if, in his words, if Delhi cannot shake off the specter of Nehru, Jawaharlal Nehru, the first prime minister of independent India, the originator of the quote unquote offensive defense border policy, and that India should reconsider its relationship with Beijing in that context. I'm wondering if you could talk a bit, so they're looking back a bit more in history about the origins of this, this very sensitive border area where there have been minor clashes. I mean, this is really the biggest, has been the biggest one in a long time. So I'm wondering if you could respond to that, the Chinese view or this view that it's really a matter of India's being offensive on the defense, as it were.
See, I'll tell you that the scenarios have changed a lot, and as this conflict happened almost after 45 years, if I remember correctly, it was last in 67 when there was some kind of violent thing between both countries. But you have to understand one thing, that right now the government, which is in India also, it is not that defensive also. It will be like, it's not going to go to the policies. If you think like Nehru, they will also go on having all defensive methods. They will definitely, as the external affairs minister said, that diplomacy will be the key. Diplomacy will be there, but they will also not leave the things or leave the ground just like that. So what I personally believe is that right now it will be on both sides a kind of offense, because they, as when you go to the narration of both the governments, so different governments are not clear like what exactly is happening, what has uh, happened in the last 4 or 5 months. It's only through the mouthpieces or through the news reports that we come to know, but clear position we are not able to know. So my observation of this is that it is not going that way. Like, India is not going to be too defensive in this. There will be diplomacy, which will play an important role, but the offenses will be on both sides, and it may go, as I told you, to a limited war, because both countries know that they cannot go for a full-fledged war, both in terms of economy, in terms of the devastation that it will bring in. And even China is also basically playing a pressure tactic. You know, what they are also trying is that they are putting a pressure on one side militarily and on the other side diplomatically, so that maybe things will happen. But if you must have seen, instead of the decrease in forces, even Indian side, the forces have increased. There have been huge number, like we read in the news just a couple of days back, that there were some points which Indian forces have also captured. So it will continue, like, you know, in those places it will continue. This time it will be more, what I see, that on both sides, the government, they will not be defensive, they will be slightly offensive. And I personally believe that that offensiveness may not lead to a full-fledged war. It will be only a pressure tactic from both sides.
Now, I think one interesting aspect of the situation between India and China is that you have two very strong leaders on either side. And I know you spent time here in Hong Kong, and then as an AsiaGlobal fellow, and then you visited China, I believe.
Yeah.
And then, and so what is your sense, understanding, how we should understand the thinking that of Prime Minister Modi in opposite with, in opposition, if you will, I mean, at least with Xi Jinping, who is a very strong leader for China. You have two very strong leaders on either side. Is that a concerning aspect for you? Do you see that as a problem, given the kind of leadership that they've already brought to bear in their respective countries?
See, in both the countries, first you have to understand is the public mood. Both leaders are strong leaders because of the public mood also. And in their own countries, people know them as a strong leader. And they would like to have that image always. They would not like to be seen as someone who has given up, you know, because when it comes to nationalism in both India as well as China, it is very strong. The only unfortunate thing that I first found was that after 1962, like when I was in Hong Kong also, I talked to so many people when I went to Beijing and Shanghai. And here also, people had started forgetting 1962 war now, and they had moved on to economy now, like doing business together, doing things together. So this is what has the recent conflict has sent a dent in that, which I feel is one unfortunate thing, because as you know, many Chinese firms have been boycotted, or the apps are not going to happen here, or the business between two countries may drop down, because considering the whole scenario, India is also a huge market for China. So that is one unfortunate thing which I see in this. But as far as the strong leaders are concerned, the strong leadership in both the countries, I feel, will also give you a solution. Because what happens is that we in last so many decades have always come with temporary solutions. And that is why these conflicts have again recurred, you know, like today you are having the same thing that happened way back in 2013. There was a bit conflict, then 1987 there was a conflict, 1996, like basically LAC, line of actual control that we say, it has never been negotiated properly as China negotiated with Russia, like giving some areas, then taking some areas. This area was never negotiated, and it is only strong leaders who can negotiate, because when the leaders are strong on both sides, the bargain is less, but it reaches to a solution. When the leadership is weak on one side and the strong on other side, then you will see that the opposition in the other country, say in India, we have democratically elected leaders. So they never recognize those things, and then it again shifts back and forth. That has been happening in last so many decades. So I personally believe that strong leadership is going to help both countries. But yes, they have to remember one thing, that diplomacy has to be given more priority. Even if they exert a lot of pressure, a lot of offensive things, they will have to backtrack. Since May or June, now we are in September. Except pressure building, what has happened? That is the only thing that's been happening. They have not gone to full-fledged any kind of conflict. And even when external affairs ministers met, whether that was a 5-point thing, then everywhere it was disengagement. So if they would have been so much pro-war, it would have happened, because you don't give so much of chance to your enemy,
Yes.
when you have to fight anything which is like a long drawn battle. But yes, it will be something which will be there for some time and tactfully solved by both strong leaders. I feel so, because Modi also has another 3 to 4 years on his side, and the Chinese leadership also has time on their side. So I think we can expect something. But yes, I always believe Russia can play a key role.
Now, one aspect of this that people have been talking about is that this situation between India and China has pushed India closer to the United States, and that the United States is kind of trying to capitalize on the situation as well. How do you see that dynamic?
See, that is something which we also have been observing. If you remember, even when President Trump had offered for mediation between India and China, that time also India did not agree for any direct mediation. But then the things again started happening, and then there was that invitation for G7 and the extension. And then also, if you see the quadrilateral security grid that has been formed, initially 4 countries, and now almost so many countries with which China is doing so much of trade are also joining that. One thing, unfortunate thing is that, which I don't understand, is that Chinese leadership is going on after everything. You have to have, we always do that back check, that if you do any work and then you check what has been the impact, say conflict in Hong Kong that has been happening there, then on Taiwan front, then on the Vietnam front, then with Australia, then with Canada, then even on the South China Sea, then with small countries like Malaysia and Thailand, and then in India. So, and with US, you already are seeing that the technology in the trade war has been there for a long time, and then the business houses are getting a hit. So this cannot survive for a long time. So what will happen eventually is that there will be US will be there, and India and US are edging close, obviously, and that's also one of the things which China is not liking. But there will also be a rise of middle meeting, that the middle power like France, Germany, Japan, South Korea, because all of them are also strong trade partners of China. And if tomorrow anything that is seen by all of them as a kind of a dictatorship, it will not be taken on a positive note. And I know that that will not also be good for China and Chinese people, because considering the huge population, considering the economy there and the market, because maximum things have been coming from China. And if these things continue slowly, as you know, there has been shifting to Vietnam, or people are planning to come and invest in India, or things like that, it will definitely be something which will not be good for China as well. So I am definitely seeing that India and US are coming closer to each other, but a lot will depend on the coming election, like
Yes.
what will happen in January, because which party is going to be there, which leader is going to be there, because Modi government has been a lot of pro-Trump, and we don't know what's going to happen next. So that will also play an important part.
Does Prime Minister Modi want Donald Trump to get a second term, you think?
No, I don't. I'm not saying that he's.
Yes.
I'm saying that pro-Republican has been because if we see all the rallies that were done, whether when he went to US or
The
when
Howdy
President Trump,
Modi and the
yeah,
Namaste Trump, right? Yes.
yeah, and
Yes.
so they do share a good relationship. And we have seen mostly that, this is my analysis, that whenever Republicans have been in power, the relationship between India and US has been much better. So if you see that whatever India has got from US in long term, it is mostly during the Republicans that India has got a lot. And so during the other, there have been a lot of talks, they have come, they have done a lot of talking, but there has been very less happening, you know.
Yes.
So
Now, uh, Amit, I'm wondering if you could talk a bit about life in the border region in Kashmir. I mean, it's almost like a perpetual tension, if you will. There's always a sense of tension in that area. And then, of course, we've had the recent sort of change of, I believe, change of constitutional status in
mhm.
Kashmir, and that's maybe heightened some tensions as well. And as in the piece you wrote, that the idea of a lockdown and living in a lockdown is nothing really new to Kashmiris, that
Yeah.
you've been living in and out of lockdowns for 30 plus years. Tell us what life is like there in that part of India.
See, well, I have been born and brought up in this conflict, and
Yeah.
since 1990s, we have seen lockdowns for months together. So in early 90s, there never used to be any internet, but all other things you used to have no facility at all. Either there would be a curfew or there would be a hartal, which is called a strike by
Yeah.
separatists here. So, and this will go on for months together, and you will not go to school or you will not go to. And for us, those days, being like, seeing guns and grenades was a very common thing, even in schools or colleges. Like, you had boys who were joining the militancy those days, and we had different kind of people in the age groups, like teens would join, and then other elders who were from the college, they would also join. And the whole atmosphere was very charged. To grow in a conflict zone among lockdowns is altogether a different experience of life, wherein normal simple things for you, for a school going kid, are very different. Like, I'll give an example, that our morning class at 10 in school, which was a science class, would start at 10, but our school was in the center of the city. We call it Lal Chowk, Red Square. And there, every day in the morning at 10, you used to have a blast. So what we would do is that under the benches, we will all duck, wait for the blast, and then the class would start. So, and sometimes the blast would delay and it would not happen at 10. So we would just be saying, oh, let the blast happen so that our class happens. Otherwise, we'll lose time. So that was the childhood that we have seen here. And then being in home and trying to spend your time within home, within that four walls, because you don't have any option to go out. So we have slowly and slowly trained. But yes, one very important thing that these lockdowns gave to us was a strong community building, because lots of people suffered, civilians on all sides have suffered always in conflict, as you know. But there is a strong community building whenever you live in such crisis times. And that is what basically takes you further. And that's
Yeah.
how you can live.
Have things improved relatively? I mean, how would you say things are today versus that period that you were talking about when you were growing up?
Yeah, like in terms of, definitely the guns and things are not that much now in the city, but definitely they are in the rural areas still there, and the conflict is still there. But the number of boys who used to be in militancy those days, number of militants has reduced. And then we had mostly local boys those days. Now you have local and foreigners, a combination. But definitely, if we have to compare it with the 90s, the scale has reduced. But yeah, the things have not been so fine, I would say. They are still okay, and you just have to live your life and manage things. Definitely, like, we had no internet, I can tell you, in all these last 5 6 years. Every time we don't have internet, even today I'm talking to you, it's 2G network, and I have just requested one of my friends to have the Wi-Fi connection, and I'm talking to you on 4G. Otherwise, we have 2G connections here, so you cannot access so many things. So imagine in lockdown of COVID, people, if they would have no internet, what they would do. So here we have been without internet, and that's how we have learned how to survive in those internet and those crisis times as well.
How did young people manage on remote learning then, if there had to be remote learning, or could they even manage remote learning?
No, there is no remote learning, but instead what we do is that we have recorded sessions of classes, like the teachers will record their lessons either on a video and thing and then give it in the pen drive so that you can watch it on your laptop or your computer. And there is nothing like online. You cannot organize something grand online classes here. It's very difficult because the connectivity is so weak and you cannot basically have a video chat or even sometimes an audio chat. And for a long time we had no internet at all, so you could not connect with people, and so obviously no such classes. That's why education did suffer a lot here as well, and students managed of their own. Like, I have studied mostly of my own in my home with reference classes and sometimes seeking suggestion from teachers.
Now, have you ever been tempted to move elsewhere? Or, I mean, you seem very dedicated to your community, to doing work for your community. But did it ever occur to you, or did you ever think about possibly moving elsewhere?
No, see, I definitely got always offers, whether I was in Yale, when I was in Harvard
Yes.
or LSE. But somewhere in my heart, I love Kashmir a lot, like my motherland. And see, I always believe that everyone gets options outside, but you have to create options within. And when you are able to create options within for young people and youngsters, that's how our place will grow and see at least that wonderful time. And for that, you have to work hard. So how come any youngster will stay back when you don't have any role model for them? So I'm very happy that at least whether we have started our event management or Bollywood productions or pharmaceutical or our trust, I interact so much with youngsters, and I'm so happy to see that it generates a lot of positivity among them to stay back and work. And now, at least now, we have many youngsters who are staying back and working in Kashmir or in Jammu and trying to do whatever best they can do to contribute for the prosperity of the place.
So, in fact, tell us a little bit about your work as a social activist, your foundation, the ambulance service. What is sort of shaping this kind of social activism and social entrepreneurship that you're doing in your home, in your community?
So basically, like, I run this foundation trust in the name of my grandfather, H.N. Wanchoo Trust, and he was assassinated in 1992 here. And he also never left it. His dream was always to see a prosperous place, Kashmir. And so healthcare is one of the important things that always was like affected deeply, and you can see even in the whole world what we have seen how healthcare is. So ambulance service was not available in remote areas during night time, and we would lose many patients. And I have personally also experienced when I had to shift my grandmother, the ambulance service was not available. So I thought whenever I will be in a position to generate some money, in which I was helped by two uh, organizations. One was Mr. Sanjay Nahar from Sarhad, and then there's a newspaper fund called Sakal Relief Fund from Maharashtra. It's near Pune and Mumbai, and they supported this along with me. And then we run this ambulance network first with two, then we added another two, then one, and now we are operating in 7 districts in Kashmir Valley. So that was one. Second, since I specialized and did my residency in oncology, cancer specialization, radiation oncology. So cancer patients are very close to my heart. So we have tied up with some organizations outside, and patients who cannot afford their cancer treatment or they have some problems in diagnosis and other things, we send them across to Mumbai, where we have Tata Institute of Social Sciences, which is one of the best institutes and cancer institutes in the country. And then we have organizations with whom support we're able to do those things. And then also e-learning education, especially the smart classrooms in schools which are like semi-private schools who are not able to afford, because government sector still is able to afford, and private schools which are high-end schools are also able to afford those things. But private schools which are not able to afford that much and don't have that much of funding, we try to help through them. And then we also work with farmers, like the saffron farmers, the almond and the walnut. As you know, horticulture is one of the important producers in our place, apple. So we try to have this more organic farming with them, wherein they can export their products and get good pricing. So that also we are working. So it has shaped up nicely. And then on my business front, I run an event management company by the name of Space Communications, and it's also into the line production for Bollywood films. As you know, Bollywood is very famous, and television serials. So in that we try to engage youngsters It was the first event management company in Jammu and Kashmir. So we engaged youngsters who were in fabrication, in stage setting, in design, in arts, in all. And from just one person, today we have more than 6 on contract with us. And then also people who are on full salary with us. So that has shaped lots of lives.
Interesting. Now, I'm wondering if you've been very generous with your time, Amit. I'm wondering if you could tell us a bit about the pandemic situation where you are and in India, how you feel about it, how you yourself and your family have been coping the last several months.
Yeah, well, this has been a bit difficult time for all of us. Like I'll
Yeah.
tell you, my office I closed on 18th of March and it's still closed. We are not operating from office, so I have given internet connection to all my employees and they're working from home, because one of the major reasons is that sometimes you have people who have already some issue with their chest or something, and then you expose them to such a crisis, then they can land up in a severe problem. So business wise, obviously work has reduced, things have not been that good. In the family front, yes, me, my parents, we are taking all precautions that we can. And I initially never allowed them to go out at all. Now they go, just because if you are not able to even give some social interaction to people, then you result in those mental health issues, because that's what we are seeing common, because we are finally social beings. So in a week we go out twice, I take them with me, or they meet some friends, but with all social distancing and things in place. Like our state, a population which is around 12 to 13 million, so we have around 1500 cases still here, and I think the transmission is still progressing, but yeah, recovery rate is fine. Like if we talk about the country, as of now, approximately we have 5.5 million cases which have been detected. For a population of India, it's very small still, and testing is now increasing rapidly, and they are going into rural areas as well and semi-urban areas as well. But the only positive thing that we see is the recovery rate. Like out of this 5.5 million, you will see around 4.5 million have recovered completely. Around 1 million are still in hospital setups admitted, and we had unfortunately 88,000 deaths. But if we compare it with the West and the countries who had were not able to handle it that way, the recovery rate is much better. But yes, now people have understood one thing, that you cannot stay home, you cannot be indoors, you have to move on, you have to work, because economy is also one of the most important aspects, otherwise you will die because of hunger. So now people are moving out, they are taking precautions, somewhere they are not taking precautions. So government is also trying to enforce some laws. But yes, it is now like people feel that anyone who has to have COVID will have COVID, but you have to go out and do your job. So that is now the situation here.
What is it as a, as a medical professional, as a medical doctor, what are the two or three lessons that you think we should draw, or that you can draw from your experience and from the experience of India through the pandemic?
See, one thing is definitely, as we all say, washing hands. You have to be just careful that whenever you are going out, while you are touching something, whether it's a metal surface or even a cloth or fabric, and washing hands is very important. And when you don't have that, you can have sanitizer with you, the alcohol 70% plus content sanitizer. That's very important. Mask, obviously, very, very important, especially when you are going to any crowded place. It's very important to have that. And third, I have seen myself, hydrate yourself. It's very important. Like after every half an hour, you should hydrate yourself with lukewarm water, slightly warm water. That's good. Have a good sleep, because otherwise you will be totally disoriented. Talk positive with those people who give you positivity, because your mental health is very important to you. If you lose that, you will not be able to come back. So it's very important to talk to positive people. Follow social media and news which is authentic. Don't follow like crazy social media and crazy news feeds, because they give you a lot and a lot of problems, and then you are not able to handle that news. All these WhatsApp groups and things, don't do that. Filter out that. And there's also one very nice exercise that has come up, like in order to check your lungs, are they doing good, because sometimes we feel symptoms in that. It's very nice that you get up in the morning, sit in a relaxed position, breathe through your nose, and then once you breathe in, stop the breath within you for 10 seconds and see if you're able to cough, or if you're it's like giving you a lot of tightness. So then you can just get the check done. Otherwise, if you're fine, it's also one of the tests which helps you. And these breathing exercises will definitely help you in having less stress. Like one of the best exercises I would tell all of you to do is 4-7-8. Like you breathe in for 4 seconds through nose. First,
Right.
relax yourself in any position, wherever you want to be. And think of the best thing that has happened to you in your life. Then breathe in through your nose for 4 seconds. Keep the breath within for 7 seconds. And then breathe out through your mouth, creating a whoosh sound for 8 seconds. And you will be fine. You can do it 10 to 12 times morning, evening. Your stress
Right.
level, everything will be fine.
Well, I think stress is one of those things that causes so many issues, right? So many health issues. And at this
Yes.
point, if we want to keep up our immunity, then it's really important to keep the stress levels down.
Absolutely. Like you have physical immunity, you have to generate mental immunity, what we call mental resilience, in order to fight all those things. And
Yeah.
for that, as I told you, these breathing exercises, talking with people who give you positivity, engaging yourself in creative things, these are very important. Having a good sleep, healthy diet, good hydration. These things are normal, and have a normal routine. Don't change your routines a lot.
I think in some ways we should probably ask Prime Minister Modi, Xi Jinping, and President Trump to do that kind of exercise and bring down the stress levels a bit, so that there can be more time for relaxed conversation and diplomacy.
I personally believe that people in both the countries, India as well as China, I have interacted with them, are fantastic people. And we need to have more people to people interactions. Like countries like India and China, you need to have at least every year 2 lakh fellowships on both sides. So that 2 lakh students come to India, 2 lakh students, Indian students go to China, and Chinese students come to India. That is where the bonding happens, because unfortunately both the countries don't know much about each other, either because of the language, also because of the food habits also, and they don't travel also a lot. It's very important to know each other, and that is how you can build up, because finally it is the public mood that sets the nation.
And I think that that's one of the issues with Kashmir. People kind of know about it, but they're not fully aware of all the nuances, all the difficulties that are involved, just the geographical issues and the
Absolutely.
topographic issues that are involved in the conflict there.
Yeah, I agree, because see, as long as you don't know about a place, you don't visit a place. Like when I visited Hong Kong, then only I came to know about Hong Kong. Otherwise you listen lots of things about Hong Kong. Or when I visited Beijing or Shanghai, so in Beijing, we met a guy who has been doing 5-year planning for China for many years. And you will be surprised that India also has something called 5-year plan, wherein they basically used to do this 5-year planning. And when I asked him, have you ever visited India in the last 3 decades, he said no. So I was very surprised that two countries who are similar in this 5-year planning thing have never exchanged ideas. So obviously, you will always have these stress levels and this warmongering happening until and unless people don't exchange themselves and their ideas with each other.
Interesting. Well, Amit, thank you so much. This has been wonderful to have this conversation. I'm glad to see you well, and I hope that you'll continue to keep well. I commend to our viewers to Amit's 3 articles on Asia Global Online. Please go to the Asia Global Institute website and subscribe and check out the Asia Global Online articles, including Amit's 3 articles that we published. And please follow us on social media, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, LinkedIn, you know the drill. And thank you very much again, Amit. It's been wonderful to see you and to have this conversation.
Thank you, Ray, so much. And thanks to Asia Global Institute and all the people in Asia Global Institute who have taught me a lot, and HKU. So thanks a lot for this session, and hopefully we'll have many more articles as well.